right? So we normally call it as ASP.NET MVC, right? Where we'll be writing code on C#, right, in MVC, but we'll be following some pattern called model view controller. Now this is something which is a pattern. I mean, we have to follow some pattern in order to create a website. So let us actually see how it actually works internally. But this is something which is most prevailing now, the model view controller in market now, rather much more than ASP.NET, right? Now there are few advantages of we have in MVC when compared to ASP.NET, right? And before that, let's understand basically what exactly is a model view and control. Now, this is an industry standard which we have, MVC. In Java, if you take, we have something called Springs, right, which follows a complete MVC pattern, right? And in .NET, we have it named as MVC. And the version which we are going to learn is 4, basically, and we'll see the latest features of 5 also. Right? So let's start with this. So when we say model view controller, they have got their own significance, right? So these three works in combination to actually get an output to the user, right? So model is something which talks about the data part, which is the actual business logic and everything will go in model. View is something which is a visualization part, where the end HTML response will be printed on a view. And controller is something which controls all the requests, right? Where to route, right? Which model to access, right? And which view to invoke, and everything is maintained by a controller. This is something which is a model, view, and controller. Now let's see how the interaction between your model view controller actually does. So let's understand that part before actually moving into RFC. This is something which is important. So every request which comes up to MVC application, right, will route in this way. Let's say that user, right, he is requesting for some page. Let's say he is actually requesting a HTTP request, which is some URL, some xyz.com basically. Then immediately, as soon as he requests, right, in our application, right, obviously it will first hit the web server, let's say IIS, and then from IIS it will actually hit our application, where the first component which will get triggered is your controller. Because controller is the one which understands the request and it knows where to route, right? And let's say whenever it gets request, and let's say this controller has to do some communication with model, then it will actually perform a communication with model, right? So it will be bidirectional. It will ask for request and it will get back the data back. Now you can see from model, again you get the things back to controller first. And this model may be doing some business logic, or let's say it is actually talking to a database, right? It is talking to a database, get some data in model. We'll see that part, right? We'll see how to create a separate entity framework or something and get data and process. No worry, we'll see everything as such, right? So here it will get the response, right? And once the response is back, then your controller will actually go to your view. Now the next one which we have is mainly visualization, right? Because every time you do some request, right? Because user is requesting for some resource, right? And that resource is a view, but before view you have to process your data and send it back to view, which is your view. You're sending, right? Including the model object, and your view will actually render all the details whatever you're retrieving here, and it will actually give it back to user as a HTTP response. Right? So this is how the model view control works. where you can see controller is the one which is taking care of all the requests as such, right? So if you plug out a controller, that's it. I mean, your request will not be right? Now take any complex application of MVC, right? Now this pattern will never change, right? It will go to controller, it will go to view, it will go to controller whenever it needs a model. It will go to this model, and sometimes sometimes we also call it as a domain model, right? Domain model where all the business logics will be written, right? So you'll have all the business logics or your database communications, and get the details and apply some business logics and create a model object, and that model object is sent back to controller, and controller will come that model to view. And view is something which will arrange all the model, all the details in its HTML response and give it back to user. Anyways, everything here, a simple line, is through IIS. This is something which is happening through a web server. The request is handled by web server input, and output, whatever is sending, is through IIS itself. So this is a complete architecture of MVC. Yes, it is a UI page. View is a UI page, basically, which is a simple HTML response. Yeah. We normally call it as a UI page. Yeah. But we can actually access your class objects or model objects here, right? And we can actually do some scripting part. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. I mean, the view is the one which is a final output. See, without view also you can actually make sure user views some content, but user will be able to see the controller name basically, right? And in the controller name, whatever view we are rendering, so that part of HTML response will be loaded to user. But yes, the end response will be a view.
Okay.
Okay, I'll show you a simple example. We'll see everything without a view. We'll start with controller, only controller. I'll show you how it works. I'll add a simple model and I'll add a view, and we'll see everything in combination. Fine. So in our first application itself, we'll actually understand what is the significance of controller, significance of view, and a model. Whether they work, they have to be together, or individually they work or not. We'll see. Fine. When we start as
So can a controller has more than one view?
You can have. A controller can have more than one view. A controller can have more than one action result based on the same, right? Obviously, it can have multiple models, interaction with multiple models, right? Here, and controller can have multiple views, but a view can have a single model, right? Because if this controller is reading this model and is sending it back to this view, then this can have a single model class where it can read that model and take it back to the user.
Okay. So model class means this one, right? The one next to controller.
Yeah. This is a plain class we have, but we normally treat as a model class to fill it in controller and give it back to you.
Okay. So, okay.
Continue.
Yeah, I mean, so view will have only one model and it can have many controllers.
No. You can have, it can be this way. You can have you can have many controllers to many models, which means one model can be used in many controllers, or many controllers can use one model. Okay?
Okay.
Which means I have a simple class. Let's say this is a simple class called let me just say an example of country. I have a country class, right? And let's say this is a controller, right? Which is, let's say, home controller. Now in home, I want to show all the countries, let's say, right? Now which means I can use this countries class in home controller, and I'll actually give that object to one view. Let's say I have some other controller here, which is let's say details controller. Now in this details control also I can use country here, which is my controller. This is a controller. I can use this country, and maybe this is referring to some other thing. Which means what I'm doing, I'm using a single model in multiple controllers. Right? Similarly,
Okay.
your multiple models. Let's say you have a country, and let's say you have some other thing called you have a country, and let's say colors. Right? This is one more model. Now maybe I can use this country and colors model in one controller. Let's say in one controller I have get colors and I have something called get countries action result. Which action result is pointing to some views. Then obviously I can have multiple models being used in one single controller. Right?
Okay.
Okay. So we'll see whatever we are actually talking about, we'll see an example. Don't worry. Fine. So let's now this is about a simple architecture we have. So let's let's not wait. Let's create a simple application of MVC and then we'll see more arcade. Right. So for application, let's create right click on the solution. So I'm going to use the same application solution here, right? So that we'll have everything in one solution. Let me right click on this and add a new project. Now this time I'm going to use a web and I can select your MVC4 application, right? And you can see a 5 I can use, but this is something which is like a top-up I've used, right? But you can see that's the reason why you can have a empty MVC project actually. But we'll first see 4 and I'll explain 5 features in our coding process, right? Now as soon as you select this, let me select MVC application underscore, let's say info. Right? So where I'm going to create. When I click on OK, right, now your next wizard will open. This is a very important wizard, right? So these settings will actually take you to the actual project creation. Now you have different application types here. You can see these are different project types here. Now your empty type is something which will create a complete empty project, right? Which will be which you'll have to start from scratch, everything, building a controller, building a configuration file. I mean building everything from scratch. Now your basic will actually give you few folders, which is same as empty, right? But it will actually give you some folder structures and all, right? But your basic is similar to empty, but few differences. But when it comes to internet application, right, it will give you a rich application. By default, it will give you few rich applications, right? It will give you at least a login model and a registration model, and it will give you few home pages, right? A few home pages, and also it will give you some about page and all, right? Which is an internet application. Now, same way you have intranet application. So here it will be using some forms authentication model, and when it comes to intranet, right? Now you can see it will actually take your Windows authentication model. You can see here it says MVC project that uses a forms authentication, and intranet is something which uses a Windows authentication model. Right? Now similarly, now these are the 4 main project types used in web. Now we have more, like we have mobile application. Now this is something which is for building a mobile web. Right? This is not a mobile app we are going to develop, but this is something which is a mobile web if you want to develop. Now this will give you support, or it will actually create by default it will create few views and controllers, right, which supports your mobile application, right? Similarly, you have web API. You can create an API project which will be plugged into any other applications. And similarly, you have single application and single page application and Facebook application. This, right? Now these are the few main things which normally use. Now let's select some basic, right? And now we have something called engine. Basically, this is something which is which type of engine you want. Either you want a ASPX. Now, if you are good with scriptlets, right? Ideal scriptlets we have used in ASP.NET, right? Then you can use ASPX, or else your Razor. Razor is an actual technology created specific to MVC, where you can actually we have a new convention to work with work in HTML page like view page to access our access different model person. So let's select Razor because this is something which is more clear now, and let's select basic and click on OK. Now when I click on OK, you can see it will create a basic application. As we have seen in our previous classes, right? ASP.NET also have few things like you can create a blank application, you can create a rich application with some forms. Similarly, you have in here where we MVC can create different stuffs. Let it create a simple application. Fine. Now you can see it created a basic application with a few things. You can see you have controller, model, and view. Right. Now this is a sample intro, right? Let me create a rich model view controller also, just to show that. So let's say it is MVC application. Let me call it as a full. Now let me select internet application and click on OK. Now when I select internet application, it will create a complete set of controllers, like at least two controllers for account at home. Right? It'll actually give us complete login model, registration model. Right? It will show everything. So this is creating. Right? Now you can see this is a rich project we have where we have two controllers, home and account. Right? Don't worry, we'll actually come to these things. You have filters, you have some models created, some model classes, you have some views. You can see you have different views here. Right? We'll actually understand all this. So let me run this project. Let me make it a startup project and do this. So we'll actually understand each and everything whatever we have here. So this will load a default view here. Right now you can see almost a basic site is already provided when you start a internet application. Here you can see you have a home, you have an about page, you have a contact page. Right? Everything is almost ready for you. And you have a logo. You can actually place this logo here. Right? Now here you can see there are two main models being provided. Either you can log in, right? If you move to the login page you have, and then if you are not if you don't have registration, you can also have a registration. It will actually give you your default set of features. So this is something which is a kind of a sample application you have here, which is your internet application. Now, let's check out different folders which we have in your let me call it as a startup project. Close this. Now here you have few folders which are very important to understand. So we already know properties and references, where you can see in your references of your project, right, you will have all the libraries which will be used, including something called system.dev.mvc. Now this is the main library which will be used to support your MVC, right? And if you right click and go to properties, right, now this will give you which MVC version you are using. Right? You can see the version we are using is 4.0. That's the reason why we said MVC 4 DLL. Right? The library, the actual assembly library we are using is MVC DLL of version 4.0. Right? So this is our main version we are using. Right? Now let's go back to the next folder that you have, and also you can see web.razor to support the actual Razor components, right? And different net HTTP, different libraries. So whatever libraries you want, right, will be added up to the libraries. Now Let's go to the next one, which is app data. Now, app data is a folder where you can actually create classes or anything which is related to application level handlings, right? And you have something called app start. Now, app start is something where you can actually create all the classes like filter class or your routing classes. We'll actually get to these filter classes, routing classes, and bundle class and everything, right? Which can be called on application start or during progression of application. Now, how does we track application start or application progress and all? We already have had this one, right? Global.sx, right? Which is an application global as application class, right? So this global application class here, right, is also a same. I mean, similar functionality we'll have here, where we have already seen this partner ASP.NET, where we have seen all the application events, right? Now here you have multiple events in global.sx also, where you can see by default whatever classes you have here, right, in your app start will get registered, right, automatically. All the filters, all the routing conflicts and everything, right? We'll see this part in our upcoming classes. That is your app start. And your content is something where you can actually save your CSS contents or images, right? Whatever the main raw part is there, right? You can actually save it here. And then you have three very important folders: controllers, where you can actually have all the controllers; models, where model classes, and the views. Views can have all the view interfaces pertaining to the controls or the individual views. Right? And you have your scripts here. Now the script is your JavaScripts or any related scripts you want to add. You can actually add in your scripts. And then you have configuration file. Now you can see by default, as soon as you create a project, right, by default it will actually add up some configurations, where you can see by default it enables your authentication forms mode here, and you have your target runtime, right? And you have very importantly something called, you can see this runtime option. Now in this runtime option, you can see which assembly is important to run this application. You can see system.mvc, which is directly binded to, right? Similarly, you have something called config sections. It is not added. Fine, we'll actually come to that part. So these are all by default. Now this is by default. You get added. So when we have this, and if there is any issue with this, right, then you will be missing some namespace extension, which you have to come back and add. We'll see that part. Fine. Provider. Okay. Fine. So this is a default configuration it actually got added. Right? And you can go to your packages, right? Now this is packages where you can actually, now all the extra packages, whatever are needed for here, right, which is for our application, will get added. Now you can see even our entry framework, which was there, got added here. It needs that, you can actually directly start up, where you can see your entry framework library is already there, right, which you can use. Now this is your packages option. Right. Now let's start with a simple creation of controller. Now as of now, you can see I don't have any models, I don't have any controllers, I don't have any views as such. But in views we have something called shared and something called view shared. This is something which is default created. Right? Now let me add a controller. How can I add a controller? You can right click on this. And go to add and say controller. So here you can add it. Say it as, now you can see for controller name, right, you should always keep the controller as is, and you have to give the controller name here. Let's say I'm going to give it as Hope and keep this controller name as is. This is a normal naming convention where we can understand the actual name of it, right? And you can see you can actually have empty, or if you have already created an API, you can use them. Let's create an empty controller. Now you can see as soon as you add it, right, now you can see this inherits your controller class here, which is under your MVC. Now when it inherits your controller class, then you can actually get something called your action results and other type of results. Now what is an action result? Now this is action result where whatever you return, right, will be taken up, like, as soon as you actually perform some, as soon as we get a request to this controller, obviously, whenever we start up a project, right, the URL is going to trigger your controller. I mean, the request is going to trigger the controller, and your controller decides what to return, right? Now you can see by default you have action result method, right, where you say your action result method name is index and you are trying to return a view. Now, do we have a view here? We don't have any view created for this action method, right? We normally call this as the action method, which returns your action result. The result of your method is your action result, right? Now here, as of now, you can see I don't have views, right? So what I can do is I can actually, you can return anything you want. Actually, let's make a change here. Let's say I'm going to return only a string, where I'll just say something like, I have something called hello world. Right? Now let's run this. Let me read the solution. Oops. Right? Let me run this. So as soon as I run this, right, so it will actually trigger, as you can see, we have a hello. Right? Now you can see you're not getting any thing here. So let's say if I'm saying home, which is my home is a controller, right? Now this is how again goes. As soon as you call some controller, see what happens, it will give you the same photo. Why? By default, for any controller, index is a default trigger. Now if I call home, right, and then leave as is, right, so the action result which will be triggered is your index. Right, so that's how it actually works. Or let's say I have one more action method here, which is your public, let's say string, let's say something called some data, so result, right, and here you want to this return, this is data action, right. Now here come back to run this. Right, so let's open up home here. And when you go to home, yes, you have this. By default, in home controller, I'm not calling any action method. Now let's say if I call data, see here, it will give you data action. Now this is how it will actually give you a plain, simple URL to create. Right? Now that's the reason why there is no extension for anything here, because we are going to use a controller, right? So you just have to call which controller should be rendered. That's it. And whatever you return in that controller's action method, that will be populated over here. But as of now, we were taking just a string output, right? Now that's the reason why you can see it is rendered in your page directly as a response. As a response, it prints the actual data you have. This is your controller here. Let's move a step ahead. Let's say you want to take an action result string, right, and not a string. So in that case, you can actually have something called content, right? You can actually set some content which will give you a content result, which is also action result. And now here I can say, right? Now let's run this. Now you'll see again that this is something which is a specific content, a disciplined way of sending a string to your page. You can see it here, right? Which is the hello. Now this is how your controller works. Now where we added a simple controller and we are actually returning some things here. Now you can see we don't have models for this. We don't have any views for this, and everything is a plain simple. Now let's say I don't want to use the contents and everything, but I want to return a view. This is what I want to do. But do we have a view for this index? Now let's run this and see what happens. When I run this application, you see my action method index is returning a view. Now you can see there is no view for index. So that's the reason why it says your index view is not found. Either add any one of them, right? It searched everything but it didn't receive, right? Because we haven't created any view. Now how can I create a view pertaining to this action result? Right? I can do it this way. So select your method, right click on this and say add view. If you already added, you can click on go to view so that it will go to that. Let's say add view. Now when you are adding view, keep your action method name same as your view name. Anyways, in URL you are going to see this action method which will be rendering your view. Now let's uncheck everything and let's add it. Now this is your simple view you have, which is an index. Now see here what happens. Your controller was home, right? Now as soon as you go to view, see here what happened. We added an index view, which you can see the extension of your view will be CS HTML. If you select VB, then it will be VB HTML. Right? Now you can see a folder called created home. Now this folder name will be same as your controller name. Right? If you create some other controller, create a view, then it will be same. Right? Now this is your simple view here. Now let me just create a simple. Now you can see it's a simple HTML. Again, you'll have where you can actually write something. Let me take the next one and say this is my first view. Right? Run the application. Now you will see a simple view being created. Right? You can see this is my first view. Right? Now here, now we move a step ahead that as soon as we got a request to controller index, right? We were able to route the view and we were able to show the data. Now let's see how we can actually do some communication between controller and index. Let's pass some data. So we have something called view bag. It is something which is like a like a dictionary. You can see when I mouse over, you can see this. It is like a dynamic view of data dictionary where you can create any dynamic variable here. Let's say I'm going to create something called some data message, some variable in it. It is like a object where you can actually define anything and say that this is as something called. Let me take datetime dot. Now you can actually keep anything here. Right? Where what I'm doing, I'm actually saving view back where in for this action method, whatever view I have, right, I'll be sending my variable called data message to that. Right? Now let's get back here. Now how can I read it? Now let's read that. Now let's print it in H2. Now in order to do it, as we have selected Razor, right? Razor engine. In Razor engine, everything starts with @ So if you remember, in our scripts we have seen something called annual bracket and percentile, right? If you select that, then it will be your annual and percentile. But here, as we have selected Razor, we will be using @. That you can see here again, your @ and open brace and close brace, everything very fine. Same way here, @ and now you can see a view by attribute, right? Dot. We have here something called data message. Let's bring this. Right? Now let's run this. So as soon as you actually get your data here, you can see it is giving you an index. Because this is my index page under home control. Now you can see your data. Now this we are actually passing from controller. See, I'll give home here, home and index, let's say, right? In which I'm selecting a controller and the action method. You can see. So I'm actually selecting the controller action method, but my view is being rendered where I'm actually getting the data from my controller to. Now this is how you can actually communicate data from your controller to view actually. So now we have completed two things where we actually tracked from controller. Now let's see a step ahead. How can we use model, and for what do we use model to actually communicate with the controller or fine. Now let's go back here. You can see there is a folder called, if you close this, there is a folder called your models. As of now it is plain blank. Let me right click on this and add a new class, because your model is something which is a plain class you have, right? And here let me call a model class as colors, right? I'm going to define a few color attributes here. So here what I'm going to do, the model is something which holds the actual variables or the actual data part will be here. Let's say I'm going to take a few variables here. Let me say color name. We have a property, that's a property, and let's say I have, let's say color code. Let me keep it as a int. Get a set, right? And let's say public, let's say name, we have a code, and let's say something called string. So what else I can take that name, code. Let's say two variables maybe, right? Name and right? Now here, let's see how we can actually use this model in our controller and pass the model object to view. So that is important. So here we are passing this view back. That's right. Now here what I can do, let me access my model class. How can I access my model class? Now you can see as soon as I type in this, it won't view me because my namespace here is different, which is namespace comes with MVC application intro dot model. So let's import that here. So we are using system MVC application intro dot models. Right? And now like that, let's say colors, right? You have your colors class. Let me call it as C colors. And what I'll do here is you have C dot color code. Color code is equal to say 1. C dot name is equal to say. Let's add one more. Color code is 2. Right? So I have a blue and a green, right? And I'm actually passing to view. Now here you can see as soon as I call view, right? Now you can see you have a few things here. You can send your object model to this view. I'm going to send this C. Now this is how we pump the model object to view. Right? I created a simple model object and I'm actually writing some code here. Now you can also write this code even in your model class. There is no issue. So let's say I'm gonna create some object. Okay, here is I have created this color object. Now let's keep it as is. Let's see the communication part and then we'll get back to this, right? Now let's keep it as is. Now, so as soon as we have view, now we can move to view here. Now here, what you can actually do, you can actually call something called the model. As soon as you view this model, it will actually take it as if you are actually taking a considering a model class. Now what model class we are saying that you can see you have something called your you have your model, which you'll be using as an attribute. Let's continue. So here you can say you have a model, right? And I'm going to take a model. You can see MVC intro dot models dot. I'll select the colors. This is my model class I'm going to use. So in the complete class, right here in index, whenever I use a model, now this will be pointing to this. Now as soon as I send model object, right, it will be automatically instantiated also. Now here what I'm going to do, let's say I'm going to take something called, let me just take it as H3, and I'll print. To access your model object, you have your model dot, you can see we have a color name, and because this model, we know that this is something which is an object of the colors, right? Let's say color name here, right, and then run this, right? Anyways, we are printing only one, but we'll see that part. You can see we are able to read one of the colors, right? So this is how we read a model in a view. Now how we created a class, model class, where I have actually assigned actual data holders, and in controller you can see we created some model object and we send the model object to view. And what is happening here? As soon as I created model object, it again got back to controller, and from controller we are sending it to view, which means you can see this pattern. Controller, we created model object, we got the data, and then we send it to view. This is something which is persistent, right? And we have a controller as a single point of contact for both models and classes. Now here you can see that we actually got it done over here. Right. Now here, let's say you want something called for each of let's say you can see here that where item, I see you can actually write your details here. So if you have a list to be defined, you can take up, but as it is an object, single object, what we can do, I'll show you this for each loop in tomorrow's class maybe. And now for now, let's take your model. Now here you have two different objects, right? Yeah, in a single object of here, we have your color code 1 and color code 2. But here you can see as soon as I create one more color code, I'm actually assigning only one, you can see, right? For this I have to assign a list and then dump this, right? So we did this simple silly thing here. So you can actually assign for one object, you can have only one color code and color type, right? So which we are showing here. Now let's say here we have a color. Now here you can see your color code and color name for that object. Because you can see I'm not using a collection of objects here, right? This is not a collection of objects. It's a single object where I can have one color. If I take one more, obviously it will override this color code and color name. That's the reason why it was giving 3. Now you can see blue and 1, right? Which is your model object. We actually got it in index and we are able to use it. So this is about your model you have, right? How we were able to read your model view controller, right? So this is about your actual startup of your MVC type of application, where you can see you have a model view controller communicating with each other and returning the actual result to the user. So we'll see more and more topics of how we can actually use model mostly and different things in MVC in our upcoming classes. So any questions? Fine. So your MVC will be a bit tricky, but it will be very easy if you can actually understand the actual working model of model view controller. Fine. Fine. Then let's wind up here. We'll actually meet up in our